All right, so I will make an introduction. Just give me a sec. I shut down everything because of this Zoom issue. So let me
turn my phone off too.
All right. Good afternoon, people. I'm talking with Anne Murphy of Florida, and she has been in the front line as an advocate for personal and health freedom for over 9 years. That's how I know her from my involvement with clean food activism and glyphosate and so on. Anyway, this is what she describes herself as a bit of a polymath or multifaceted talent. She is a political activist, she is an independent journalist, and she is a researcher, and has in the past worked for the election campaigns of Donald Trump, now the president of US, and Ron Desantis, the current governor of Florida. Her work involved backchannel information gathering and what she calls uh, guerrilla marketing strategies. She has written for several national alternative news publications. She is also a non-practicing libertarian. I shall let her explain what that means, and a constitution-loving patriot. She is happy to share her thoughts on this current state in the US with regard to the coming election and its potential and its monumental effect that it might have not only on USA but for the rest of the world as well. And she's happy to share this time and explain her thoughts to me. I asked her about it. I'm Tony Mitra, the cantankerous old fool, opinionated man in British Columbia, Canada, diametrically opposite on the map from Florida. But I used to live in Florida many years ago when she, I believe, was living in Boston. So, hello, Anne.
Hi, Tony. It's nice to be here. Hi, everybody who's watching. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is really exciting times right now, just in terms of like the big worldwide picture, like you were saying, but in terms of, this equivocal moment in American politics that could really decide a much larger fate. I had the pleasure of meeting Tony, like, he was saying, through our food activism, through the glyphosate activism community, Moms Across America, working with Health Nut News. And, you've just, made so many contributions in this world, and I really love your message. And it's just, a pleasure to come be here today. I just wanted to say
Fantastic. So tell me, before we move on to the election, what is a non-practicing libertarian?
Well, a non-practicing libertarian is a libertarian in ideals, but doesn't necessarily vote on the libertarian political spectrum. I'm much more of a realist or a pragmatist in the sense that, I believe even in this terrible two-party system that we have in this country, that you're going to have to pick the better of the worst, so to speak. So, in that case, I don't always vote libertarian.
Okay. So the topic goes to your involvement with campaigns of Donald Trump and the current Governor Desantis of Florida. So you have been a volunteer kind of for them?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's a great place to start. I mean, my foray into American politics started when I was 7 years old and went to my first George Bush rally. But I have my cousin who actively worked for both the Gore and Kerry campaigns. I come from a political family, but it really wasn't until the 2016 election that something just stirred inside of me. And a lot of it had to do with this, aspect that, I truly believe that there is a worldwide cabal, kind of running things that we can talk about later. But I was getting fed up with the political system. I felt like ever since Reagan in politics, or even going back as far as Kennedy, that nobody has really presented themselves and won or been elected into office that was a real political candidate that had these ideals, like let's say Kennedy had, about not being as entrenched in deep state politics. So when Donald Trump came around, I was so excited. I really did believe that he was part of what was really going to change this country and this world, or maybe our last hope even for that regard.
So so you took part in the 2016 election of Donald Trump? And then what about the governor of Florida?
Well, yeah, the presidential election, that was a whirlwind. I did a lot of work of marketing, but I actually, one of my, accomplishments working with a certain group of people I'm most proud of is actually the work that we did during the 2018 election of Ron Desantis. During the end of the election, there was a recount and, all this controversy between the Republican and Democratic side because there was a narrow region of about 50,000 votes. During this time, there were a bunch of journalists and I who were actively going out and pursuing, electoral voting centers and trying to follow where these votes were being taken. In certain circumstances, we found egregious errors, votes being distributed in unmarked trucks and cars that weren't registered government vehicles, being driven off by polling centers, as well as somebody who sat on one of the West Palm Beach electoral committees who was a volunteer who said they saw, people writing in ballots. So, I mean, there was a lot of controversy over fraud within the election, which is why I think this is just an amazing topic to talk about, the upcoming election, the potential for fraud within the election. And, if Donald Trump gets elected or if Joe Biden gets elected, what's going to happen to the world?
So, the reason I wanted you to talk about it, or some American to talk about it, is our belief that unlike almost any other presidential election, this one is a COVID and New World Order influenced election more than any other. And any pandemic, anything in the past, there have been political, backstabbing or whatever, corruption, so on, everywhere. But this is the COVID NWO election. And it appears, at least to some of us, many of us, in fact, that the entire establishment owned by the New World Order or the globalist or the elitist, whatever you call it, the entire forces seems to be singularly against Donald Trump. I'm not judging Donald Trump is a good guy or a bad guy, he's a human being, but they seem to be singularly against him, as if anything and anybody, even a dog or a lamppost, would be preferable to him. This is why, this is primarily the reason where some of us who are not automatically following, believing everything the TV or the politicians say, instinctively guess that Donald Trump is something that the New World Order is unable to control. Donald Trump is probably not towing the line with them. And that is why they would prefer anything and anybody but him. What is your idea in that?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go to Occam's razor on this, which, the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And you just need to turn on the TV or the MSM in the United States, open up a new newspaper, put Google News and, type in Donald Trump, and you're going to see the negativity and the media bias on such a large scale. One could only, conclude that there is some sort of, and, maybe we're imagining things or maybe we're not, some sort of higher level cabal trying to prevent Donald Trump from being elected. Now, the whole concept of a cabal has dated back ever since ancient Egypt and ancient societies, secret societies. We can go back to Hermeticism, the Knights Templar, or you can start talking about, the early stages of what is known as modern day Illuminati. But I mean, I think there is a consensus that there is a ruling class of power who control the military, who control money, the banking system, who control laws that, have governed this system for a very long time in civilization.
So would you like to, in your work in research and so on, would you think that making a comment on the history of US elections in the past, there are some points of reference that might be useful to hear now? Do you recollect anything other than the hanging Chad issue of 2000 when George Bush got elected?
We're definitely going to talk about that one. We're definitely going to talk about hanging Chads, but the real interesting one and the history lesson here is the election of 1876 between Hayes and Tilden. Real interesting story because it was the first election where after December 13th is when the Electoral College is supposed to reconvene. There wasn't a vote cast. And there was all these, underhanded things going on within state assemblies about sending in votes. But the real, I think, story here behind this is that this was the first election that could have caused a civil war, but also started a lot of new kind of constitutional enactments, specifically the Electoral Count Act of 1877, Article 2A, kind of discussing a lot of these things. But where I see the relevance here is the fact that there is historical precedent that elections can become corrupted and the good guy doesn't always win, and there's underhanded ways specifically that can be used to usurp power in an election.
So Hayes was one of the early, he was maybe not the first one, who won the presidency through electoral college without getting the popular vote.
Yes.
And of course there was a lot of brickbat, and those days they were not, it was in the 1890s or what, something like that, right?
It was in the 1870s, and there were 3 states, I think it was Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, where both electoral colleges from both sides, both Democratic and Republican, both sent in results that either candidate had won. And so this kind of created this additional farce within the whole electoral process, and it was decided kind of like through the back doors, in kind of the same way that the 2000 election was decided, where Gore just conceded. And so they in a way they kind of had to declare an elector in order to prevent civil war. Now, one of the interesting things is that the Confederacy, kind of in trade for this, had to withdraw troops from certain states. So I think that there's always negotiations going on, and in this election cycle, that could be something that ends up influencing things. Now, the thing that I would
maybe say that although the Democratic candidate had more electoral college votes, not the majority, but he had more than the Republican one.
Yes.
But in the political shenanigan,
exactly.
it was the Republican one who was given the presidency because he agreed for the southern states certain privileges with regard to removing northern soldiers out of the states or something of that kind. And
Yes.
it was a political, what do you call, agreement that you do that and we will give you the presidency, something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I wonder in terms of the 2000 election, because, a lot of people know the details of that, but, there's a lot of people who think that Gore could have, gone after the recount further in terms of the 4 counties, in terms of canvassing, and the vote would have ended up in his favor. But, Gore conceded, days before, all this recount could have happened. And who knows, there might have been something that happened hush hush behind the scenes that we don't know.
Mm-hmm. I was living in Florida during that time. What I remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the what do you call, the court, you don't call it Supreme Court. What do you call it? The provincial court?
What are you talking about? It is the Florida Supreme Court.
Okay, the Florida Supreme Court had ordered for a recount because the difference was so close that automatically the election laws in Florida required a recount, and in the recount the things were going in favor of Al Gore, and therefore there was a good chance that if the recount was done till the end, all the votes were counted by hand instead of the machine, then Al Gore would win. But then when the Florida Supreme Court ordered for the recount and the recount started, and it was taking several days to do that, the Bush campaign team took the matter to the US Supreme Court, who stopped the recount.
Yes. And
by a merest of few hundred votes difference, all the electoral college seats of Florida went to Bush, and Bush won the election. Many people believe that if Supreme Court did not stop the recount, the presidency would have been Al Gore's.
Yeah,
so
and
in a way, Supreme Court weighed in to, how to say, to not count the vote, recount the vote, to not get an accurate answer in a way, and that was that was in a way, unacceptable situation for many, even Republicans. They did not like Supreme Court interfering the way it did,
Yes. Well, it was really interesting too, because during that process, there was several log calls to Jeb Bush's and Dick Cheney's office, over 100 calls during that time. So, in terms of, what went on behind the scenes in terms of strategy, or if there was some sort of, deep political influencing going on at the time, is really up for speculation.
So what do you think is likely to happen this time? This time the stakes are way higher, I think. Anyway, that's my opinion. The future of both the nation, USA, as well as the free world, is in a way hangs on the hinge, or it's at stake. This is what I feel, and the complete takeover of the Western society by this globalists, or the cabal, as you call them, is going to be facilitated or opposed, depends on who wins the election. This is how most of us, at least I see it, and many of my friends who look at it the same way. And this is why it is also important for Canada. We believe that Canadians will be influenced one way or another by what happens in USA. There is no way to getting around it. Canada has only one border, and that's with USA and with nobody else. And with 1/10 the population of USA, there is no way Canada can actually do things contrary to US flow of whichever way the US flows. So go ahead. What is your best estimate of what's likely to happen? Is it going to be contested no matter who wins? Is there going to be civil unrest? Is there going to be some sort of a modern day version of a civil war, or what?
Well, I want to preface this by saying I think this is all, going to go down to not only the Electoral Count Act, but the, Article 2 of the Constitution, which gives states utmost authority in terms of determining the presidential election on a federal level. So in terms of individual states, one of the things that we're seeing is this rush within legislation to push out mail-in voting times, kind of all this working, and, what's a vote that's going to be counted, what's not, in favor on the, Supreme Court level. It's either favoring the Democrats or Republicans right now. So we're seeing a lot of these moves, kind of last minute moves, like in a lot of these swing states. Pennsylvania, the GOP right now is contesting the timeline for absentee ballotism. So there's going to be a lot of things up in the air. What I'm really predicting right now, and why I think this Supreme Court nomination is not only good for Donald Trump, but I think good overall in terms of, I'm obviously a conservative, like maintaining the integrity of this election, is that I do believe that, there is rampant fraud to be had. There's been recent media stories about ID cards showing up in Chicago that were tied to registered voters, over 20,000 of them, all of them the Democratic Party. And there's all these, recent accusations of ballot frauds in Wisconsin. There's mail disappeared. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So with all this being said, the Democrats have been doing, their war games. The Republicans have been doing their war games, because I think everybody knows that Biden is not going to win the Electoral College in a landslide on election night and not have some sort of
but he is not.
Yeah, that's not going to be a scenario. So
no, just a moment. Did you say Biden is going to, or Biden is not going to?
No, I said Biden is not going to win by a landslide. I said that is the only scenario that I see in terms of Biden really having smooth sailing. I think this election is going to be contested no matter what. And I think it's going to go down to the individual swing states. And I think it's all being impacted by legislation that these
states. How do you say Biden is not going to win a landslide? What are your reasons for that assessment?
I have some statistics here that are really interesting. 40% of this year's election is vote by mail, which is twice that of the 2016 election. The statistics I have right now is
why is 40% by mail? Because people are afraid to go out because of COVID, or what?
Yeah, COVID. People are afraid of COVID. So
mail has a better or higher chance of fraud being committed when it's mail?
Well, it's not specifically the fraud. And here's the thing, because there are going to be people going out, well, Trump's going to say, well, they're writing in ballots or losing them. I don't think that that's the quote unquote definition of fraud that we're looking for. I'm looking for the counting fraud, like when a ballot is postmarked, what's an official ballot? Has it been verified? Is it going to there's something known as third-party ballot harvesting that the GOP is trying to stop, where you have to bring
what is third-party ballot harvesting? What is the meaning of that?
Well, typically, when you cast your vote by mail, or you want to turn your absentee ballot in, you have to take it into a specific election center or polling center. Now, there are some states which have this law where they allow this third-party ballot harvesting, and what people are concerned about, because it's on such a local level, and it's dependent on local jurisdictions, not even county or state jurisdictions, that there's more potential that they don't have as much supervision over these type of votes.
So this 40% mail-in ballot, there's going to be a huge amount, 100 million or more, that need to be hand counted eventually, right?
Yeah, eventually. But the more interesting statistic here is that 50% of the 40% of the vote by mail is actually Biden supporters, where 20% of Trump supporters are voting by mail. So we have this discrepancy that's eventually going to lead.
Why is that? Because majority of the Trump supporters prefer to go physically to the polling booth, or some other reason?
Well, I mean, there's been a massive campaign, Donald Trump tweeting and giving campaign speeches, encouraging everybody to go out and vote in person so their vote will be counted. So I think there's a lot of marketing strategy. And, I think that the Republicans and GOP are very distrustful of the voting process.
So in your opinion, more Trump supporters will physically go to the polling booth, whereas not so many will put in mail, whereas on Democratic side, there'll be more people who may not go to the booth because of fear of COVID or whatever, and they might mail it in. This is one reason, or because there is more fraud expected from the Democratic side. That means more fictitious vote will come in by mail in support of the Democrats. What do you think is the likely reason for this increased number of mail-in votes expected from Democrats?
Well, like I said, I think a lot of the Republican marketing strategy has influenced the GOP, is mainly distrustful of voting by mail, wondering where their votes go. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I could make psychological references. I mean, I could go a lot of places, but I mean, it gets even scarier. I picked this up in Forbes magazine 2 days ago. 2/3 of Biden supporters in swing states, this includes Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, so 66% of Biden voters are all voting by mail. They've polled and sampled people, and now the Democrats are scared because they're trying to get people to go and vote in person now.
Oh, I see.
I mean, there's a lot of concern because we're going into the scenarios. I mean, I think the most likely scenario that I see is that it's going to come down to the swing states. They're not going to obviously declare a president on election day, and we're going to go on with these recounts in these swing states for weeks and weeks. It's to be contested in court. I think where Trump is eventually going to gain victory in all of this is that he has the backing of not only the U.S. Supreme Court, but this is something really interesting I found, and I'm going to actually read from this, within the 1877 Electoral Count Act. Now, what this states is that if there is not an elected president by inauguration day, that the vice president is in charge of interpreting the final vote count and settling all states' problems if the vote hasn't been reached. And so Mike Pence...
This is for individual states or the total tally?
The total tally. So Mike Pence can go into the states where there hasn't been a sent tally to Congress, and he can go in and, using this Electoral Count Act, he can go in and actually, because it's so hazy, he can go in and make definitions about when the ballots need to be stopped counting and lay down the law. And if that happens, there will be a default election that goes in Congress. And right now, something really interesting is that when there's a default election in this really strange constitutional scenario, that the Congress actually elects the new president based on the Electoral College. So we might have a House right now that's a majority Democratic, but if you take the states and put them into the Electoral College, we actually have a slight Republican majority. So, I mean, worst case scenario.
When you say Congress, do you mean the House or the Senate?
I mean the House.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So, so a few points. It looks like in your assessment, the victor will not be declared on the day of the election because of the huge number of mail-in ballots, which cannot be counted 1 month ahead of time. The counting can only start probably on the day of the ballot itself and not before that, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So it cannot be counted in 1 day, so it is likely to spill over for quite some time, maybe even weeks.
Yeah, and plus, you know, each state, like I said, is, you know, there's this rush to enact legislation to decide what the time period is after election day that the votes will be counted to. So there's a deadline, but they're trying to extend deadlines right now. So that's going to be interesting.
That is one thing, and it is likely to take several weeks.
Yes.
And it is likely to be contested. That means no matter how the counting goes, the losing party is likely to take to the courts challenging the result. Is that right?
Yes. And right now, I mean, we have in the 8 major swing states right now, we're split in terms of governors being Democratic and being Republican. So, I mean, it really is going to come down to the swing states and state-run, you know, the constitutional amendments that are being passed right now in terms of what the deadline is for vote counting, what constitutes a vote versus what invalidates a vote, and postmarks.
And you said that Trump enjoys the support. I don't remember the exact word you used, but he seems to have the support of the Supreme Court. Can you elaborate on this one? How?
Well, Trump, I mean, we currently right now we're sitting in a 4-4 split. Ginsburg is gone. If Trump gets the blessing of the Senate and gets a new Supreme Court appointee, we're going to be 6-3 in the conservative majority, which, you know,
right now it is 5-3 or what?
Yes, it's 5-3.
Oh wow! I did not know that. So that is why. Is that why the Democrats are going berserk and they don't want to even consider approving any candidate, so that the Supreme Court is one judge short?
Yeah. And Kavanaugh has been neutral on a few cases, which is part of their concern about not, quote unquote, having a majority.
Who is neutral?
Kavanaugh.
Oh. So he is generally counted as Republican or pro-leftist?
I mean, it doesn't. He's generally counted as a Republican, but they can dissent. You know, their vote, you know, not necessarily based on political parties. I mean, they're supposed to be objective.
So are you also going to be volunteering like you did the last time?
Probably for the DeSantis campaign, but you know, I'm leaving it all up to the second generation. I ran around with a flag on my car and all the bumper stickers and, you know, all of that, and made all the phone calls and stayed up late at night, you know, talking to people on Proton Mail. So, you know, I would like to think that I've passed the hat down to the next generation.
Florida has been recently pretty stable conservative state, I would say. But tell me, the second part of the discussion, what is the link with the New World Order and what is likely to happen should Trump not be evicted from the White House?
Well, I mean, that's actually a pretty open-ended question, but I mean, I think, you know, looking back on, you know, the Bush crime family, the Clinton crime family, and, you know, how this kind of all ties in, you know, back to the, you know, Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and, you know, this kind of concept of, you know, 13 families running the world under this kind of kind of nebulous kind of concept of deep state-run government. I mean, this is something, that could, span, a whole day-long conversation. But I mean, it's quite evident, just even looking at, the number of people who have died. Actually, there's something really interesting with the Clinton cartel. The Attorney General in Florida is considering a case against Bloomberg on him paying felons, kind of usurping this recent law that DeSantis passed, that basically says that felons can't vote until they pay these fines. Well, Bloomberg took up a bunch of donations and is now willing to pay off these felons' fines, and this charity fund he had set up, and the Attorney General of Florida is now going after Bloomberg, saying it's unconstitutional and it's third-degree felony. Well, I just heard through a friend of mine, it's breaking news, that the Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, her assistant, was just found dead in Fort Lauderdale of non-parent suicide. So, I mean, in terms of, the lengths that people will go now in order to protect this election, to protect these facts from coming out, I know it's just becoming quite alarming. For example, what do I think is going to happen? I mean, there was discussions back in 2016 if Hillary won. I mean, there was some outlandish things that Walmarts were FEMA camps. And I mean, you can go to the crazy side of things, but, in terms of realism, I don't think they want good things for this country. I think that they want to kind of merge the United States from being a more nationalist, kind of isolated superpower to more merging in with this, concept of globalism, where, that this one ruling body rules, this one giant class, we've read enough 1984 and Brave New World to know that maybe this is not a good idea, especially when the people running, because I do believe globalism is, the eventuality of the human race, as long as we, can maintain, our spirituality and higher level standards is where we should be going. But these people who want globalism, the NWO, the cabal, whatever you want to call them, do not want good things for humanity. They don't care about us. They poison our food supply. They deplete our resources. They keep raising prices and driving the middle class out, and all these terrible things that I don't think people want. And something people really have to consider is that these Democrats, as Biden, Clintons, the Bushes, they all have ties to this deep state. And if we don't act on this now, I mean, I don't foresee a good future for America.
You do not?
No, I do not. There are a bunch of us here who are more open thinkers, and we're terrified. We're already thinking about moving to Mexico, moving to another country, getting out of here, making our 5 to 10 year plan. I mean, we're scared.
I am told that the liberal enclaves of USA, such as California, for instance, and some other places, people are already trying to move out if they can. Is this correct? And why are they moving out?
Well, yeah, they are moving out. I mean, in terms of California, we had a discussion about, how hard it is to find a moving van now moving out of California because there's so much demand. Speaking with my friends in San Diego, Laguna Beach, more in Southern California, I think people just got fed up with Newsom and, the mask mandates where they're forcing people to wear masks outside, and, the compounding of, all these, health freedom laws and stuff. I think people finally are just getting sick of it.
So,
there's
people
so
are
much,
moving
so
out
many
of places like California because of COVID restriction, excessive COVID restrictions, and they're going to places where this craziness is not so prominent. Is that correct? And which are the places where they're easier?
Florida. Everybody has to stay away. People are moving here. I heard recently the rate of 1,000 per day. People haven't left for the season. Typically it's really hot here in Florida. People leave for the entire summer, and it's probably about 2/3 of the population. Well, everybody decided to stay this year. But that's an example. I think people are moving to states with more conservative governors who lay down the law. They know that they're going to have, somebody like, in terms of, Ron Desantis, somebody to look out for their rights, saying that, we want to be able to go out in public. We need our kids to go back to school. This is important. We don't necessarily believe in the COVID testing numbers. So I think there's an active move to more progressive states where governors are, a lot, more conservative, a lot more open, a lot more fair, I suppose, with their policies.
You said 5 to 10-year policies. If things keep moving downhill for some independent thinkers and out-of-the-box thinkers, of which you are one probably, are thinking of a plan B where you may have to altogether leave USA. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a bunch of us. I mean, it's actually kind of scary. I mean, I'm already putting together a long-term financial plan. I don't know what the cost of living in this country is going to be. I mean, I'd much rather be in Mexico, and save a ton of money and start up a business down there for potentially expats and be out of this law and jurisdiction of this in this country. I mean, our rights are being infringed upon. I'm starting to worry that maybe you're not in the foreseeable future. I might not be able to travel internationally if I don't receive a vaccine. I mean, these are the types of issues, that I'm really concerned about.
So do you anticipate countries like Mexico or some Latin American countries, maybe Puerto Rico, or I don't know, Ecuador and so on, those will be better in these when it comes to these restrictions, what you just mentioned about
I think
vaccines and this and that?
I think there's going to be just due to lack of government funding and resources. I think you're going to go to a lot of these places and they're going to leave people alone. And I think there's a lot of us who have that kind of fantasy of going off grid or living in a commune or something like that. I mean, I want to go live off grid. I don't want the government involved or messing with anything that I do. I just want to live off the land and live my life out in peace. And that's a great concern that I have. I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to do that in this country.
And this is a serious concern for many of you, right?
Yes, there's a lot of, in the whole, I don't like that word, awake community, there are a lot of us who are considering, a lot of people right now, presently, thinking about leaving this country, going to the UK, going to, a lot of my friends, there's a lot of migration going on right now. I think people really want to be in the place that, gives them, freedom, rights, benefits, et cetera. And people are taking that more into consideration now more than ever.
Fantastic. Any last words? We have covered.
I do predict a Trump victory in the end. So if anybody wants a crystal ball or bet on Vegas, Anne told you so.
You predict or you wish?
I predict.
Oh, so you.
I really do think Trump's going to win the election. I think there's going to be a huge period of chaos, but I think there's so many good things coming out. The Hunter Biden report. That today, I believe, Rand Paul is recommending to an executive committee for prosecution or more further investigation. So, I mean, there's a lot of really great things happening right now. I know all the quote unquote QAnons and truthers or, people believing in disclosure, kind of the new government, I think, are going to start to see more and more positive things. And I really do believe Trump will be elected again.
Fantastic. Very nice, Anne. Very nice talking to you. We should do it more often.
All right. Sounds great. I enjoyed this so much. I haven't done this in a while, and I'm not feeling so well. So thank you for being patient with me.
No problem. Take care.
All right. Take care.